Far beyond the borders of known space, a small alien research fleet drifted through the silent dark. They were explorers from the Varine Collective, a civilization known for curiosity more than conquest. Their mission was simple: to find traces of lost technologies, learn from them, and understand the forgotten stories of the universe. For decades, they had searched through dead systems, barren asteroids, and wrecked stations. But this time, their scanners detected something different, something far larger than anything they had ever found before. At first, it looked like a metallic shadow floating alone in the void. The scanners picked up faint echoes of its structure: layered armor, massive hull plates, weapon mounts larger than their ships. It was silent, cold, and completely still. No life signs, no power signals, just a giant mass drifting between the stars. The fleet stopped at a distance. Their communication screens glowed faintly as officers and scientists tried to understand what they were seeing. The readings were confusing. The ship didn't match any known design, not even from ancient records. It was old, but its shape was built for war. Every line of it spoke of power, precision, and purpose. One scientist quietly said what everyone was already thinking: it looked human. That word carried weight. Humans were a mystery to the Varine and to many others across the galaxy. Stories about them existed, but no proof remained. Some said humans destroyed themselves long ago. Others claimed they left the galaxy entirely. A few believed they still existed somewhere, hidden and silent. The idea that this ship could be human filled the entire crew with an uneasy excitement. The fleet's commander gave the order to approach carefully. Their smaller scout ships moved closer, sending light pulses to measure distance and structure. As the light washed over the dark hull, strange reflections appeared. Symbols, scratches, and markings unlike anything in the Varine language. They looked almost like warnings. The main bridge was quiet except for the hum of the scanners. Then a soft signal appeared on the screen. It wasn't a transmission, just a repeating pulse: 3 beats, pause, 3 beats again. A pattern. Some thought it was mechanical noise. Others thought it might be a distress beacon. No one could tell. After long debate, they decided to send a boarding team. 5 researchers volunteered. They were not soldiers, but explorers, skilled in scanning, translation, and neural mapping. They were told to collect samples, record data, and come back before anything strange happened. The commander's last words before they left were clear: "Be quick, and do not touch anything you don't understand." The shuttle drifted toward the massive ship, its lights cutting across the endless dark. As it neared, the size of the warship became clear. It wasn't just large, it was terrifying. Whole cities could have fit inside it. The shuttle felt like a dust particle beside a mountain. They found an open hangar bay wide enough to swallow moons. The inside was coated with dust and fragments of frozen debris. It looked abandoned for centuries. When the shuttle landed, the sound echoed into emptiness. The team stepped out slowly, their lights sweeping through the shadows. Everything was made of metal so dense their scanners struggled to read it. The air inside was thin but breathable. Someone said softly, "It's like the ship has been waiting." Their boots clanged against the floor as they moved deeper. The corridors were huge, made for beings much taller and stronger than them. Along the walls were strange marks, handprints maybe, but human-shaped. They found doors that would not open, control panels dead and dark, and strange energy crystals embedded in the walls. As they recorded their findings, something strange began to happen. Their data scanners started giving random readings. The temperature dropped, then rose again. Magnetic fields shifted like the ship was slowly waking up. One of them heard a low vibration beneath their feet, faint but growing. They stopped to listen. It faded again. They decided to continue. The deeper they went, the more the air seemed thick, almost alive. Their communication with the shuttle became weaker. Static filled the line, but they didn't turn back. Curiosity was stronger than fear. In one corridor, they found writing burned into the wall. The translation system couldn't decode it, but somehow they all felt they could almost understand it, like the words were being whispered directly into their thoughts. The symbols glowed faintly when light touched them, as if reacting to their presence. One of the researchers said it out loud, "It's watching us." No one replied. They reached what looked like a control chamber. Rows of dark screens, thick cables, and a massive viewing window facing the stars. Everything was silent. They set up their instruments, hoping to download whatever data the ship had. Maybe it would reveal its origin, its purpose or the story of the humans who built it. The moment they connected their systems, the ship responded. The entire room flickered. A faint hum echoed through the metal. The consoles lit up, one after another, showing lines of human text. The researchers froze, unable to move. The language was ancient, yet somehow they all understood it. The message was short. Only 3 words appeared. Identity required. Access denied. Then the lights went out again. They tried to speak to each other, but the sound in their helmets became muffled, distant. Their heartbeats seemed louder than their voices. Suddenly the walls around them shimmered like heat waves. A faint image appeared on one of the screens, a figure in armor, human-like but faceless, standing in silence. The image didn't move. It only watched. Fear crept in. They decided to disconnect and leave, but their tools refused to shut down. Their lights flickered, and for a brief moment the room felt like it was spinning. Someone stumbled and fell. Another shouted that they heard whispering through the comms. It wasn't clear, just fragments of words in an old human tone. One voice, calm and mechanical, finally broke through the noise. It spoke in perfect clarity. Intruders detected. Memory scan initiated. The team panicked. They rushed to escape, running through the corridors that now felt unfamiliar. The doors they had passed earlier were gone, replaced by different ones. The ship had changed itself. They couldn't find the way back to the hangar. Every turn led them deeper inside. The whispering grew louder, mixed with echoes of their own voices, repeating things they hadn't said. Their lights dimmed again, leaving them in near darkness. One of them shouted their own name as if trying to remind themselves who they were. But even that began to fade. Meanwhile, outside, the command ship watched from a distance. The shuttle's beacon still showed inside the warship, but all radio contact had ended. They sent repeated calls, but no one replied. Only static came through. Static filled with human-like murmurs and strange beeping rhythms. The commander ordered a halt to the mission. Something was wrong, something beyond understanding. They decided to wait, hoping the team would find a way out. Hours passed. Then the warship's hull lights glowed faintly for the first time. A soft golden pulse traveled along its surface, like a heartbeat restarting after ages of silence. The fleet's sensors spiked with power readings so strong they overloaded half the equipment. Then just as suddenly everything went dark again. A few moments later, the shuttle detached from the hangar and drifted back toward the fleet. The crew exhaled in relief, believing the team had made it out. But when they hailed the shuttle, no one answered. Its autopilot was engaged and its interior lights were off. When the shuttle docked, the airlock opened slowly. Inside, they found the 5 explorers sitting quietly in their seats. Their helmets were removed. Their eyes were open, calm but empty. They looked alive, but none of them spoke. Medical scans showed no injury, no trauma, nothing wrong physically. But when asked who they were or what had happened, they said nothing. They didn't seem to understand the questions. It was as if their minds were blank, rewritten. They didn't even recognize their own language. The commander watched in silence, unable to explain. The warship in the distance floated motionless again, as if nothing had happened. Its hull lights were off. Its pulse was gone. Just another silent relic among the stars. The fleet's scientists later examined the shuttle's recordings. Most of the data was corrupted, filled with static and flickering images, but one short clip survived for a few seconds. It showed the warship's bridge lit by a dim blue light, and the faint outline of a human figure turning toward the camera before the feed cut out completely. After that, the commander ordered all ships to pull away. They left the coordinates unmarked in official records. The Varine Collective would not speak of this mission again. But among the crew, stories began to spread. They said the human ship was not dead, it had been waiting, and those who tried to study it didn't just lose their memories. The ship took something deeper, something it was still holding on to. As the fleet disappeared into the darkness, the warship remained alone, drifting quietly through the endless black, guarding whatever secrets it still carried from the lost age of humanity. The ship that came back to the fleet carried silence with it. The 5 explorers who had boarded the human warship sat quietly inside their shuttle, staring blankly at the walls. Their faces showed no fear, no emotion, just emptiness, as if all feeling had been erased. When the medical teams checked them, everything looked normal. Their hearts were beating, their minds active, but they could not speak, not even to each other. It was as though their memories had been locked away somewhere beyond reach. The commander of the fleet watched them through the observation window. It was hard to believe these were the same people who had volunteered only hours earlier, laughing, talking, excited about the discovery. Now they looked like strangers wearing familiar faces. The commander felt a deep unease. The human warship still floated silently in the distance, dark and motionless, as if it had gone back to sleep after taking what it wanted. The scientists worked day and night, scanning the shuttle and the team for any trace of what had happened. They found faint electromagnetic residue clinging to their suits, the kind that comes from direct contact with high-level AI systems. But the ship's energy readings had been dead when they boarded. It didn't make sense. Something had awakened only for a short time, long enough to change them, and then disappeared again. The medical staff tried memory recovery methods. They played sound frequencies, images, and familiar voices, but the explorers only stared. Their eyes followed movement, but they didn't react. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, one of them would start whispering in a strange tone, words that weren't in any known language. The scientists recorded it and tried to translate, but the system couldn't identify even a single symbol. One evening, one of the officers thought he heard a whisper coming from the main communication deck. He followed it and found nothing, but on the screen a message appeared for a second before vanishing. It said, "They belonged to the ship." No one could trace where the signal had come from. Fear began to spread quietly through the fleet. Some said the warship wasn't a machine, it was alive. Others thought it was cursed. But the commander refused to leave until they found answers. They had found something extraordinary, something no one in the galaxy had seen in centuries. A human warship was a discovery worth any risk. Or so they believed. They decided to send another team, this time unmanned drones. Hundreds of them were released toward the ship. They entered through the same hangar and started mapping the structure. For a while everything went smoothly. The feeds showed vast corridors, chambers filled with dust, and what looked like giant machines frozen in place. But 20 minutes later, the images began to distort. The video turned blurry, and strange patterns appeared on the screens. It was as if the drones were being watched. One by one, the feeds cut off. The last few seconds of the final drone's footage showed a single glowing eye-like shape appearing in the dark, staring directly into the camera before everything went black. The commander ordered all signals to be cut. The warship was sealed off once more, drifting alone. But something had changed. The ship was no longer cold. Energy readings began to rise again, slowly, faintly, like a heartbeat restarting after a long sleep. Days passed. The 5 explorers who had lost their memories began showing small, strange changes. Their brain activity shifted to patterns never seen before. Sometimes they moved in perfect sync, as if responding to a single invisible signal. They didn't speak, but when one of them raised a hand, the others did too. It was like they were connected. The scientists grew more worried. The commander finally ordered isolation. The 5 were moved to a separate research vessel for safety. But even there, strange things began to happen. Lights flickered when they were near. Electronic devices stopped working. At night, crew members claimed to hear soft whispers echoing through the hallways, whispers that didn't belong to any living voice on board. One of the engineers who was monitoring their brain activity noticed something terrifying. The neural patterns weren't random. They matched a digital signal that had been transmitted from the warship right before the explorers were found. It meant that part of the ship's intelligence might have transferred into them. Somehow the human warship had reached into their minds and left something inside. When the commander heard this, they gathered the officers for a meeting. Everyone looked tense. No one wanted to say it, but the truth was clear. Whatever the humans had built, it wasn't a normal ship. It wasn't dead. It was a guardian, maybe a weapon, maybe something more, and now it might be inside them. That night, without warning, the isolated vessel sent a distress signal. It came from the room where the 5 explorers were kept. Security cameras showed them standing around the center of the room, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The crew tried to reach them, but the doors were locked from the inside. When they finally forced entry, the explorers were gone. The room was empty. Only the sound of a faint hum filled the air, like a machine running far away. The commander rushed to the window and looked outside. The human warship was glowing again. Light patterns ran across its surface, and its engines began to pulse with power. The forbidden ship that had drifted lifeless for ages was awake. Panic spread through the fleet. Ships moved back, alarms rang, but no weapon was fired. The commander gave a single order: do not attack. No one knew what would happen if they did. The warship turned slowly like a giant waking from sleep. Its hull shimmered with energy, and faint human symbols appeared along the side. They couldn't translate the words, but everyone who saw them felt the same thing in their chest: a deep, sharp sadness mixed with warning. Then something unexpected happened. The warship sent out a signal. It wasn't a message in sound or light. It was something else, something that passed through their ships and minds at once. For a brief moment, every person on every ship saw the same image: a world burning under a bright sky, humans standing in silence as stars fell behind them. A voice echoed through their thoughts, not loud but calm and heavy. It said, "Do not seek what was forgotten," and then the vision was gone. The warship powered down again, fading into darkness. When the fleet tried to scan it afterward, they found no trace of energy. It was as lifeless as before. But the 5 missing explorers never returned. Their life signals vanished completely, as if they had been absorbed by the ship. Days later, strange things started happening aboard the fleet. People began to forget small details: what day it was, where they'd stored their gear, the names of colleagues. It seemed harmless at first, just exhaustion. But soon the forgetfulness spread. Memories vanished as if they had never existed. Logs and records became blank. Even the ship's computers started showing missing files. It was like the fleet itself was being erased from history. The commander finally made the hardest decision: to abandon the site. Before leaving, they marked the coordinates as forbidden, hidden under deep encryption so no one else would ever find it. The message was simple: do not approach the human vessel. When the fleet jumped to safer space, everyone looked back one last time. The warship floated silently among the stars, cold and empty again, yet deep inside something still glowed faintly, like a heartbeat waiting to wake once more. No one ever spoke of what they saw, but every person on that mission carried a strange feeling they couldn't explain, a sense that the humans hadn't vanished after all. They had just chosen to be forgotten. After the fleet left the area, silence once again covered that corner of space. The human warship drifted quietly, a shadow among the stars. No signal came from it, no pulse, no sign of movement. To anyone passing by, it looked like an ordinary wreck, forgotten by time. But for those who had seen it awaken, that silence was more frightening than anything else. Weeks passed as the Varine fleet tried to recover from what had happened. They had traveled far away, yet the memory of that mission stayed in everyone's mind. The commander tried to restore order, to keep the crew focused on their duties, but something had changed. People whispered that the warship had marked them somehow, that even across light years it could still reach their thoughts. At first it seemed like superstition born out of fear. But then small things began to happen. Crew members reported hearing faint echoes on the communication channels, even when they were turned off. A few said they saw flashes of blue light reflected in the observation windows, though there were no stars nearby to cause it. Others said they dreamed of strange corridors made of metal, with human symbols glowing softly on the walls. In the dreams, a deep voice kept repeating the same phrase: remember what was forgotten. The scientists dismissed it as stress. They told everyone the mind often creates patterns when faced with fear, but in secret, they were worried too. Some of the data they had brought back from the mission had started changing on its own. Files that were once corrupted now played strange sounds, rhythmic pulses that resembled heartbeats. Video fragments began to show movement where there had been none before. In one recording, taken from a drone that had entered the human ship, a new detail appeared: a reflection on the metal surface, shaped like a human face watching from behind the team. The scientists checked the metadata and confirmed that the image hadn't been there before. Somehow it had appeared after the mission, as if the file itself had grown. Meanwhile, the commander started noticing something unusual in the crew. Some of them had begun to forget simple things: short commands, security codes, even the names of their own departments. It wasn't serious at first, but as days went by, it spread like a quiet sickness. No one knew what caused it. Medical scans showed nothing wrong. Yet every day more memories vanished. The fleet's leadership decided to hold a meeting to discuss the possibility that something from the warship had followed them. Maybe not physically, but as data, energy, or something they couldn't yet define. They considered deleting all the information they had collected. But before any decision could be made, the ship's systems went dark for a few minutes. Every light flickered, every monitor turned black. When the power came back, the room was filled with a cold silence. The main screen displayed a message written in human text. "We remember you." Panic spread through the bridge. The commander ordered the system shut down completely, but the message stayed. Then a faint sound followed, a soft echo that seemed to come from deep space. It was not a signal, not a call for help, but something in between. When they played it back at slow speed, it almost sounded like a heartbeat. The fleet tried to move farther away, but even during long jumps through light-speed travel, the sound returned. Sometimes it came from their own speakers, even when disconnected. The message was always the same: 3 pulses, pause, 3 pulses again. The same rhythm the human warship had once emitted before the boarding team vanished. Fear turned into quiet dread. The commander ordered all ships to isolate communication systems. They decided to head for a research station near a quiet moon, hoping to analyze the signal safely. The scientists began their work, trying to decode what was happening. During their study, they discovered something unexpected. The faint energy, readings surrounding their ships matched the same pattern as human neural activity. It was as if the warship had somehow imprinted part of its mind onto the fleet, and now that pattern was spreading. Some crew members started to behave strangely. They spoke in half-sentences, as if translating thoughts that weren't entirely their own. One officer began drawing strange symbols on the walls of his cabin, the same symbols seen inside the human ship. When asked why, he simply said, "They want to be remembered." The commander grew worried and called for a full quarantine. But before any action could be taken, the station they were approaching sent an urgent transmission. The message was brief and filled with static. "Do not come here. We received your signal. It carries memory." The transmission ended abruptly. That was the first time the fleet realized the truth. They were not just being followed, they were carrying something. Something invisible, silent, and alive in a way no machine should be. Days turned into weeks. More people began to forget. Some didn't even remember their own names. Others felt new memories appear, memories that weren't theirs. One scientist claimed he remembered standing on Earth centuries ago, looking up at a blue sky. He described cities filled with humans, battles fought in space, and a ship called Titan 09. He swore those memories felt real, but he wasn't human. The commander listened in disbelief. "You're telling me you remember a world that doesn't exist anymore?" the commander asked quietly. The scientist just nodded, tears in his eyes, whispering, "It wasn't supposed to end like that." The fleet's council finally made the decision. They would erase all data related to the mission, every file, every record. The ship's memory cores were wiped clean, and even personal logs were destroyed. They thought it would stop whatever was happening, but it didn't. One night, while the commander was in the control room, the ship's main view screen came alive. A faint blue glow appeared, forming a shape. It looked like a star map, but one they didn't recognize. In the center of it was the outline of the human warship. Around it were dozens of smaller points of light, other ships perhaps, or beacons. Then the display zoomed out until the entire galaxy appeared. A deep voice spoke, calm and distant. "They wanted to understand us. Now, we understand them." The lights faded again. No one could explain what they had seen. The star map didn't match any known system. Some believed it showed the locations of other human vessels, still hidden in the galaxy, sleeping just like the first one. Others said it was simply a warning. Soon after, the fleet's communication with the rest of the collective began to fail. Messages they sent arrived corrupted or not at all. Navigation systems glitched, showing impossible coordinates. It was as if space itself was shifting around them. And then one day, the fleet realized they had no idea where they were. The stars outside didn't match any chart. They had somehow been moved or lost. The crew's memories continued to fade. They could no longer recall how long they had been traveling. Only fragments of their old lives remained, pieces of songs, or the smell of rain, or the memory of laughter. Everything else was gone. And then, one morning, they saw it again. The human warship, floating quietly in the distance, as if it had been waiting for them to forget enough to find it again. The commander stood frozen. They had traveled thousands of light years away. It should have been impossible. Yet there it was. The same ship, unchanged, its hull dark but glowing faintly with blue light. The voice came once more, faint but clear. You cannot study what you already are. The fleet's systems went silent. Every screen, every sensor shut down. The last thing anyone saw was the human ship turning slowly toward them, its engines pulsing with life again. No one remembers what happened after that. Centuries later, deep space travelers found a group of derelict ships drifting together, covered in dust. There were no life signs, no working systems, and no records of who they belonged to. On one of the hulls, carved faintly into the metal, were words written in an ancient human language. Memory is the price of discovery. The human warship was nowhere to be found. When the fleet disappeared, the galaxy carried on in silence. Stars burned, worlds turned, and civilizations rose and fell without knowing what had happened in that quiet corner of space. For a long time, no one spoke of the human warship. The Varine Collective erased all records of it from their archives. To them, it was better that way. Some truths were too dangerous to remember. But stories have a way of surviving even when memory fades. Pilots whispered about a ghost ship that appeared in the deep void, a vessel larger than any other, drifting alone with a faint blue glow. Some said it was a mirage. Others believed it was a remnant of the old human empire, a warning from the past. No one dared to check. Until one day, a small salvage crew picked up a weak signal. The signal was simple: 3 pulses, a pause, then 3 again. It sounded mechanical, harmless even, but to those who knew the old stories, that rhythm was a sign of something best left untouched. The crew didn't know that. They were just scavengers looking for old wrecks to sell for scrap. They followed the signal for days, passing through empty sectors with no stars, just the cold dark. Finally they saw it, the outline of a giant ship half hidden in shadows. It looked ancient, built with strength that time couldn't destroy. Its surface was covered with scars, yet not a single piece of it was broken. The crew stared in silence. "It's huge," one of them whispered, his voice trembling with awe. As they moved closer, their scanners began to fail. The systems glitched, showing false readings. The computer thought the ship was moving, then still, then gone. The captain decided to turn back, but curiosity won. "Just a quick look," he said. Their small ship docked with one of the outer sections of the warship. The airlock opened with a hiss of old pressure releasing into the void. Inside, everything was quiet, too quiet. The walls were lined with black metal that seemed to absorb their flashlight beams. Every step they took echoed like footsteps in a cathedral. The crew explored carefully, marking their path so they wouldn't get lost. The corridors stretched endlessly, twisting into shapes that didn't make sense. There were no signs of battle, no bodies, no damage, only silence and cold. It felt like walking inside a sleeping creature that could wake at any moment. One of them stopped and looked at a wall where faint marks glowed under the light. They weren't random, they were words. Not in Varine language, not in any alien script. The letters were human. The translation scanner struggled to read them, but finally, one line appeared on the small screen. "We were never gone." A chill ran through them. They decided to go back. But as they turned, the corridor behind them was no longer the same. The path they had marked was gone. The ship had changed. Their communication with their vessel outside turned to static. Panic began to spread. They tried running back the way they came, but every turn led to a new corridor. The lights in their helmets flickered, showing flashes of other places. Hallways filled with shadowy figures. Rooms with screens that showed faces they didn't recognize. The ship was showing them something. Or maybe it was showing them itself. Then came the whispers. At first faint, like wind moving through hollow pipes. Then clearer, human voices speaking softly, almost kindly. The words weren't threatening, but they carried weight. "We asked for peace," one voice said. "We gave them time." Another voice followed, deeper, sadder. "They forgot what they were." The crew huddled together, trying to make sense of it. The captain shouted into his comms, but there was no reply. The air felt heavy now, almost alive. One of the crew members pointed ahead. A soft blue light flickered at the end of the corridor. Without a word, they followed it. The light led them into a massive chamber, a control deck that looked untouched for centuries. In the center stood a large console, still glowing faintly. The light pulsed with the same rhythm as the signal they had followed. The captain approached it slowly. His hand hovered over the panel. Before he could touch it, the console activated on its own. Screens lit up, showing human symbols, faces, and images of battles fought among the stars. It was like a history playing itself. They saw humans standing in a burning sky, fighting enemies that no longer existed. They saw fleets of ships, thousands of them, moving with precision and power. Then they saw destruction, entire worlds falling silent. The last image was of this very ship alone, drifting away from a dying galaxy. Then everything went dark again. A new message appeared across the main screen. "Do not search for us," the crew stepped back, terrified. One of them tried to speak but froze mid-sentence. His eyes went blank, his body stiff. Then he began whispering in the same human language the ship had used. No one could understand him, but the tone was calm, almost peaceful. The others tried to drag him away, but the floor beneath them vibrated softly. The walls started to hum, and every metal surface seemed to come alive. The voice of the ship filled the air, not loud but deep enough to make their bones shake. "You are not meant to remember." And then silence. When they woke, they were lying in their own ship floating far from the warship. Hours had passed, but no one remembered how they got there. The ship's computer logs were blank. Every piece of data from their mission was gone. They tried to recall what they'd seen, but the harder they tried, the less they remembered. It was as if the memories were fading even as they spoke. The captain looked out through the viewing window. The warship was still there, motionless, watching. He felt something inside his mind. A faint pressure, like someone gently touching his thoughts. He couldn't hear words, but he understood the feeling. The ship wanted to be left alone. They left without saying a word. Back in known space, they reported finding nothing. But soon after returning, each of them began to forget more than just the mission. They forgot their homes, their families, their names. Within weeks, none of them could remember who they were or where they came from. The doctors said it was impossible. The scanners showed their brains were fine, yet their minds were empty. The ship they had traveled in was found drifting months later, without crew, without logs, without history. The only thing left inside was a single line scratched into the control panel. "We found them, but they found us first." The human warship was never seen again in that region. But across the galaxy, strange reports started appearing. Explorers hearing human voices in the dark, ships losing their data after scanning certain frequencies, and travelers waking up with new memories that didn't belong to them. No one could explain it. Some believed the human ships weren't gone at all. They were still out there, hidden beyond time, protecting something sacred. Others said they were ghosts of an ancient civilization, punishing those who tried to uncover their secrets. But a few whispered another theory, one that spread quietly among scholars. They said the humans had learned something that no one else dared to understand. They had found a way to merge mind and machine so deeply that death and memory no longer meant the same thing. Their warships were not machines. They were living extensions of their minds. When humanity vanished, their thoughts stayed behind inside those ships. And maybe when someone touched one of those ships, it didn't destroy them. Maybe it simply remembered them. As the stories spread, governments banned all expeditions into the dark sectors. Maps were edited, records sealed, and space travelers warned never to follow signals with 3 pulses and a pause. But still, some couldn't resist. Curiosity is stronger than fear. Every few decades, another ship would vanish near the edges of the galaxy. And each time, a faint signal would appear again. 3 pulses, pause, 3 pulses again. A quiet heartbeat echoing through space. People say it's the same warship calling. Not to attack, not to harm, but to remind the universe of something it tried to forget, that humans once existed, and their legacy was not just steel and fire but memory itself. And maybe, somewhere out there among endless stars, that ship still waits, watching, remembering. For years after the salvage crew vanished, the galaxy stayed quiet. The Varine government locked down the entire region where the human warship had been seen. They placed warning beacons declaring it forbidden space. Any ship that entered never returned. But still rumors spread, rumors that something ancient was moving again in the dark. It started with strange dreams. Across colonies and outposts near the edge of known space, people began to wake in the middle of the night, remembering flashes of battles they had never fought, faces they had never seen. They described vast ships surrounded by light, voices speaking words they didn't understand. It wasn't just one or two people, it was hundreds, then thousands. Scientists tried to explain it as some kind of shared delusion, but deep down everyone felt it wasn't. One night, in a quiet station orbiting a dying red star, an engineer working the night shift heard something strange on his comms channel. At first it was static, then 3 short beeps, a pause, and 3 again. The same signal that had led others to vanish. The sound echoed in the small control room, soft but heavy with meaning. He froze. Every warning told him to ignore it. But curiosity always wins when it comes to humans, or anyone who still carries their spirit of discovery. He played the signal again. The static began to change. It almost sounded like a heartbeat. He hesitated for hours before sending a report to the research fleet. When he did, they ordered him not to respond to it. But that didn't matter. By the time they arrived, the signal had already spread across every nearby system. Ships, satellites, even ground stations were picking up the same rhythm. 3 pulses. Pause. 3 again. At first it seemed harmless, but soon things began to change. Ships reported power surges when they received the signal. Computers glitched and displayed human symbols, letters no one had seen for centuries. Some screens showed short messages, "Remember us." Others showed maps of the galaxy, with one point highlighted in deep, dark space. The government tried to shut it down, blocking communications, cutting power to affected regions. But the signal didn't stop. It wasn't traveling through normal radio waves, it was appearing inside systems, almost like it was alive. And the strangest thing was, no one could trace its origin. It didn't come from anywhere. It just appeared. That was when the Varine decided to act again. They gathered their best scientists and their strongest warships. Their goal was simple: to locate the source, to erase it once and for all. They believed it was the same human warship that had haunted them for decades. When the fleet reached the dark region, scanners detected something massive. Bigger than any known structure. A shape hidden among drifting asteroids like a mountain floating in the void. It wasn't just one ship, it was many. Dozens. Hundreds. All motionless, surrounding the first warship like guardians standing watch. Their surfaces glowed faintly, covered with symbols and scars. No two looked the same. Some were sleek, others ancient and rusted. Yet they all pulsed with that same blue light, the same heartbeat signal. The commander of the Varine fleet felt a chill as he watched the view from his ship's main window. It was like a graveyard but alive. Every instinct told him to leave. But his orders were clear: investigate, analyze, report. They sent drones ahead scanning the closest ship. The drones vanished from the sensors. No explosion, no interference, just gone like they had never existed. The commander ordered a retreat, but it was too late. The signal changed. Instead of 3 short pulses, it became a long, steady tone. Every system in the fleet shut down. Lights dimmed, engines stopped, gravity failed. The ships drifted helplessly. Then in the silence, voices began to echo through their comm channels. Not alien voices, human ones. Calm, emotionless, but full of something heavy. Something that felt like memory. "We told them to remember," said one voice. "We asked them to stay away." The commander tried to respond, shouting into the microphone, demanding to know who was speaking. But there was no reply. The screens around him began showing faces, humans. Soldiers, engineers, scientists, children, all looking straight at the camera, all with eyes full of sorrow. Then the faces disappeared, replaced by text. "We are not gone. We became what we built." The commander's second in command looked at him, fear written all over his face. "Sir, it's not just ships out there. They're alive," he was right. The human warships were not machines anymore. They were living memories, minds fused with steel. Every one of those ships carried consciousness, pieces of the people who once commanded them. When humanity faced extinction, they had done something no one else dared. They had transferred their thoughts, their souls, into the very vessels they built. That was how they survived. Not as flesh and bone, but as will and memory. The Varine didn't understand it. They saw it as a threat. They launched a desperate attack, firing everything they had. The missiles vanished mid-flight. The beams scattered before reaching their targets. The warships didn't even move. They didn't need to. The attack simply didn't exist anymore. Then, one by one, the Varine ships started losing control. Their systems turned against them, showing scenes from the past, images of humans walking among stars, building alliances, saving worlds that the Varine had long forgotten. They saw humans not as warriors, but as protectors, as builders. As dreamers, it was overwhelming. Some crew members began crying without knowing why. Others whispered words they didn't understand, as if memories not their own were waking up inside their minds. The line between who they were and what they saw blurred. Then came the final voice. It was deeper, older, calm beyond anything they'd heard. "You tried to understand us," it said, "but we are not meant to be understood. We became memory, so the galaxy would remember what it means to care, yet every time they forget, we return. We don't bring war, we bring reflection." A wave of light passed through the fleet. It wasn't bright or violent, it was soft, almost peaceful. When it faded, the ships were gone. All of them. No wreckage, no debris. Just the human warships floating silently, pulsing in rhythm. Weeks later, the Varine government received an emergency signal from one of the missing ships. When they found it, there was no one aboard, just empty corridors and echoes. But something strange had happened. Inside the captain's chamber, written on the wall in perfect human letters, were the words, "We saw them. We understood. We forgot ourselves." After that day, everything changed. The forbidden region was completely sealed. The Varine stopped all deep space exploration. And yet the signal continued, repeating endlessly, soft and patient, like a reminder that refused to fade. Somehow the story spread again. Space travelers began reporting mysterious visions near certain stars. Visions of old human faces smiling faintly before fading into light. One freighter captain claimed his ship's AI suddenly spoke in a human tone, thanking him for keeping the stars safe. Others said they saw massive shadows moving between nebulae, like silent guardians watching from afar. The galaxy started to realize something. Maybe the humans hadn't disappeared by accident. Maybe they had chosen it. Maybe they had become part of the fabric of space itself, woven into its energy, its rhythm. The heartbeat signal wasn't just communication. It was life, resonating across the stars, reminding everyone that some legacies never die. Scientists tried to decode the full message hidden in that signal. It wasn't random. It contained layers of meaning that changed each time it was analyzed. Some said it adapted to whoever listened. It would reveal what you needed to hear, not what you wanted to know. For some, it brought peace. For others, it brought regret, and for a few, it brought purpose, the desire to find them again. Across the galaxy, new expeditions began in secret. Not for war, not for study, but for understanding. Pilots, researchers, wanderers, all following the faint echo of that human heartbeat. Most never returned, but those who did spoke softly, eyes distant, as if they'd seen something too vast for words. They never said what they saw, only that they no longer feared death, and so the legend grew. The humans were no longer a myth. They were something more, something eternal woven into the stars themselves. Every time a traveler felt that strange sense of being watched in deep space, they knew it wasn't danger. It was presence, a quiet, unseen promise that humanity's memory still protected them. Even now, that signal continues, faint but steady. 3 pulses, a pause, 3 again, like a soft heartbeat echoing through endless night. And though the galaxy has moved on, some still listen. Because deep down they all know, the humans are still out there, watching, remembering, waiting for the right time to return. The galaxy had moved on. Decades had passed since the last sighting of the human warships. Most civilizations stopped talking about them, calling them myths, stories made up by travelers who'd seen too much of the dark. The governments erased the reports, the scholars stopped their studies, and the ordinary people forgot. But not everyone. A small group of explorers still searched for the truth. They called themselves the listeners. They weren't scientists or soldiers, just ordinary people who couldn't let go of the mystery. They believed the humans had left something behind, something that could explain why every civilization that encountered their warships forgot everything. For years, they followed the signal, the same soft heartbeat of 3 pulses, a pause, then 3 again. It appeared and vanished across the galaxy like it was leading them somewhere, and finally it did. The signal grew stronger near an abandoned star system, one with no planets and no light. The listeners entered the darkness and saw it, the warship. The same one everyone feared to speak of. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal, reflecting the faint glow of distant stars. It didn't move, didn't attack. It simply waited. The team approached slowly, whispering to each other even though they didn't need to. The silence around the ship was heavy, almost sacred. When they got close enough, the ship's lights came to life, soft blue veins of energy spreading across its surface like living skin. Then, a voice spoke. Not from their comms, not through sound. It spoke directly into their minds. You should not have come. The words weren't angry. They felt tired, almost sad. One of the explorers gathered enough courage to respond and thought, "We only want to understand." The silence lasted for several moments. Then the voice returned. You cannot understand what you no longer remember. Before they could ask what that meant, the ship's surface began to change. A panel opened, revealing a wide hallway glowing with faint white light. It wasn't an invitation. It felt more like a test. The team entered, unsure of what waited for them inside. The interior was calm, filled with a strange hum that vibrated through their bones. It didn't feel mechanical, it felt alive. The walls seemed to breathe, pulsing gently. As they walked deeper, they saw images forming in the light. Faces, places, memories, flashes of human life, children playing under blue skies, cities shining on green worlds, ships launching into the stars filled with hope. They stopped, speechless. These were the humans they had only heard about in old stories. They weren't monsters or conquerors. They were dreamers, builders, protectors. Then the images changed. The light darkened. They saw war, entire galaxies burning, endless fleets clashing. The humans fought side by side, not for control, but for survival. Against who, they couldn't tell. The enemy was never shown. Only the destruction was clear. And then they saw the last image, the moment everything ended. The humans standing together, surrounded by light. One by one, their bodies dissolved into energy, merging with their ships, their machines, their creations. They didn't die. They became something else, something eternal. The explorers realized the truth. Humanity had not been destroyed. They had evolved beyond life itself. They had chosen to live as memory, as consciousness spread through the stars. The voice returned, softer now. We became what we built. We are not gone. But to protect what we were, we had to erase what we are. They didn't understand at first, but then it hit them. Every time someone found the human warships, they lost their memories. Not because the ships attacked them, but because the humans made it that way. It was their final defense. They couldn't risk being worshipped, feared, or used. They wanted no one to follow their path. So they built something into their existence, a safeguard. Anyone who tried to uncover their truth would forget. Their minds would reset like waves washing away footprints in the sand. One of the explorers whispered aloud, "Why? Why make us forget?" The voice answered, "Because knowledge without wisdom destroys. We learned that too late." The air around them grew warmer, filled with a quiet vibration. The explorers could feel emotions that weren't theirs: sadness, love, pride, regret. It was the echo of billions of human minds still living inside the ship. Every thought, every memory, every feeling that once made them human still existed. Then one of the explorers noticed something at the center of the chamber, a sphere of glowing light, floating in midair. It pulsed like a heart. They approached slowly, and when they stood before it, the ship spoke again. "This is what remains of us, our memory, our soul. Every act of kindness, every tear, every dream we carried, it lives here. And it will continue to live, as long as someone remembers who we were." The explorer reached out a trembling hand. Before touching it, he asked, "If we remember, will we forget too?" The ship paused, then answered, "Yes, but not all is lost. What matters most stays inside the heart even when the mind lets go." He nodded slowly and placed his hand on the sphere. The light spread across his skin, soft and warm, like sunlight on a winter morning. In that instant, he saw everything. The rise and fall of human civilization, the laughter, the love, the loss. He saw their final moment, when they decided to let go of everything physical so that life in the galaxy could continue without their shadow. When he opened his eyes, he was standing outside his ship again. The others were there too, confused and quiet. None of them could remember how they got there. The warship was gone. Days later, when they returned home, they tried to write down what they'd seen. But their memories faded like smoke. They remembered feelings, but not details. Only one thing stayed clear in their hearts: a deep sense of peace and an unshakable belief that humanity had not vanished. They had simply become one with the universe. Years passed. The explorers grew older, their story spreading across small communities. Some believed them, most didn't. But those who listened closely felt something inside them awaken, a quiet reminder of what it meant to be human, to dream, to build, to protect, and to remember. Sometimes, travelers still hear the signal: 3 pulses, pause, 3 again. The sound of the human heartbeat that never stopped. Those who follow it never return, but those who listen from afar say it brings them calm. They say it feels like home. And somewhere in the endless dark, beyond the reach of any star, the human warships still drift. Not as ghosts or weapons, but as guardians. Watching. Waiting. The humans made the galaxy forget them so no one would repeat their mistakes. But they also left something beautiful behind. A piece of themselves hidden in every star, every world, every living being that dares to dream. Because deep down, in the smallest spark of every soul that looks at the stars and wonders what's out there, the humans are still there. They are the whisper in the silence, the warmth in the cold, the light that never fades. And though no one remembers their names, everyone carries a part of their story, written not in books, but in the heart of existence itself, even now. If you listen carefully in the quiet of space, you might hear it. 3 pulses, a pause. 3 again, a heartbeat that never died.